Please welcome screenwriter David Magee, producer Marc Platt, co-lyricist Scott Wittman, and composer and co-lyricist Marc Shaiman. Thank you very much. Welcome, all of you. And you know, the film theater geek in me is freaking out about this A-team because, you know, David Magee, Academy Award nominated for Life of Pi and Finding Neverland, Marc Platt, La La Land guys, I
was nominated. I didn't win. I did win for 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and then I had to give it back.
And Marc Shaiman and Scott Wittman, Hairspray guys, is like this is
not the musical, just the actual Hairspray.
So, Marc, I want to start with you. The fact that this, you know, the movie set during the Depression era, London, but. What a timely movie for us to have this sort of, we're living in such delicate times, and then to have this film that just reminds us to be hopeful and to be, you know, have resilience.
That was actually our hope, that message would be received. I mean, we started on this journey because Rob Marshall couldn't be here today, the brilliant Rob Marshall, and by the way, nobody could do that but Rob Marshall. Really extraordinary direction, and all of us here remember the first time we saw the first film. I was a little kid, and it was in the days where you got dressed up to go to the movies, and my mom and dad took me downtown. We lived in the suburbs of Baltimore, the Mayfair Theater, and it had such an indelible impact on me, both just the world of it and also that maybe I could participate in creating something like that at some point. So we all came to it with a lot of love and passion to begin with, and the bar was very high in terms of how would we do this. And one of the reasons that I was comfortable doing it was because Rob Marshall was going to do it and take the helm, but also because we felt that we're living in a very fraught time, and what would the world be like if we didn't lose all the things we've lost? It's not a home, and in this instance, a mom, childhood. We're living in a world where we've lost civility and the idea of forgiveness and how to get along and light. And all those themes are in this film. And when we realize that the sort of the cautionary tale of it is what Angela Lansbury says, which is, the grown-ups will all forget by morning. And Mary Poppins says, well, they always do. That for us was the film, because what a world would it be if all of us didn't forget so quickly the idea of light and possibility and nothing cynical in the world. And that's why we wanted to bring Mary back and make this film now.
Thank you. David, you were entrusted with the screenplay. P.L. Travers wrote other versions, you know, Mary Poppins opens the door, Mary Poppins comes back, Mary Poppins in the park. Did you go back to those sources? And
we did, absolutely. There are 8 books by P.L. Travers. They are very episodic. They're wonderful little, each chapter is an adventure. They go to the park and they end up talking to a statue, or they go to the shore and they end up going underwater and dancing with the fish. And at the end of each chapter, they come back home and Mary Poppins insists it never happened. And that's essentially the structure of the book, so much so that by the time you get to the later books, P.L. Travers says, these chapters happened sometime during those other books. And it's wonderful fun, but you have to find a story to kind of take you through all of that, which was our challenge from the very beginning. And especially, why is it that Mary Poppins has to come back? Because presumably she did a pretty good job the first time. You know, the Banks family should be healed. George Banks, the banker, should be happy. And why would he fall back and become that same troubled guy? And we played with it for a long time, and we never quite felt satisfied with any of those answers. But Rob Marshall had noticed from the very beginning that on the first page of that first book, it says that, which takes place when it was written during the Depression, that the Banks household is the smallest and shabbiest on the street. And so we were kind of playing with that idea of starting in a troubled time, starting during the Depression, and then one day it made sense that all those years had passed since the first film, which was set in kind of the turn of the century, and Jane and Michael had grown up, which doesn't happen in any of the P.L. Travers books. And that was the starting point for our story, and along with Grown-ups Forget.
Mary seems a little more acerbic this time around. A little.
That's true of the books. She has a little sharpness to her, a little vanity, a little prickliness at times. She's very eccentric, and so we all concentrated on going back to the books and kind of trying to capture a little more of that character, which I think actually deepens her, because underneath all of those superficial things, she has an enormous heart. And so to see those characteristics on top of things only helps to kind of expand the character. And then what Emily did with it was unbelievable. Just
How about that performance?
Incredible. Absolutely.
And
she delved into the books, really. She obviously saw the film as a child, but then thought in preparation for this, she needed to study the books and then find her own way, which she most assuredly did.
And Mark, tell us about.
You always have to say which Mark.
Well,
We're each both Marks with a C, which
true.
is very exciting, at least to me. To have another one.
Mr. Shaiman. We've all grown up with the Sherman Brothers, music. What was it like doing the follow-up to what they'd done?
Terrifying. I'll add to that.
Yeah, for everyone working on the movie, there was clearly moments of like, are we insane? Chutzpah is but our love for it was stronger than our fear, but it was certainly tough. When we first went in to write, Scott and I usually, on any project, we stare at each other for a few days just saying, paralyzed with fear, paralyzed with fear. And so here we had so we had not only the white page in front of us, which is terrifying enough, but we had the Sherman Brothers on this shoulder with the greatest song score ever written for an original movie musical. And then the fact that we learned, we're also going to be writing songs for Lin-Manuel Miranda, the greatest writer of his generation for theater. So it was kind of hard to get to the piano, weighted that low. But eventually, it was the gig, and it was the gig of a lifetime.
Eventually, you have to put pen to paper, and that was liberating. But we had spent months with David and Mark as well, and Rob and John, his partner, and we had spent months in a hotel just playing What If. So we had all read the books. We had come with all the books in our heads, and we just said, what if this, what if this, what if this? And that was before any word was written. So that really gave us, and then we all went off and wrote together. So that was sort of fun.
For us that don't understand about the process, how did this? This script feeds the songs, and the songs feed the script.
We did that. And that was. It was 4 months in that hotel room. Don't get any ideas. Yeah. Where we really, by the time we left that hotel, we had basically the house built. Mm-hmm. And then we had to go furnish it with love and find all the perfect ways to fill every room with love. And
because Rob and John come from the theater in the beginning, and so we all treated it like an original musical. So David would write like in the situation where Ben Whishaw, the wonderful Ben Whishaw, sings a song about it where he's having a conversation with his wife. David had written a monologue which we sort of appropriated and said, why don't we take a crack at that? So it was very much a collaboration like in the theater.
Absolutely.
So, and that was really, that was one of the best writing experiences I've ever had in a very long life. In show
Same
business.
here, and what was wonderful about it was we were talking story, we were talking characters, we were doing all of this, and then suddenly someone would say, "That's a song." Now, I've never written a musical before, so I'd smile and go, "Okay, song," and I'd write the word down. And then these guys would turn what we had talked about in that outline into something just magical. And
It's the great challenge of writing a musical, and Rob Marshall is a genius at it. But it's about not really knowing where the dialogue ends and the song begins. So you feel instantly comfortable because the song is earned, because there's agency in it, because it's furthering the story or the characters at such a place where you want to hear he or she sing what they're feeling. So as long as it's earned that way, and so it's a very collaborative writing process, and they're all writers of equal import in accomplishing it if you do it well, which they did here for sure.
Marc Shaiman, tell us about the Trip of Life Fantastic, the showstopper in the movie. How did it come about, and how difficult was that to shoot? I mean, it looks just spectacular.
Well, when we were writing most of the songs, most of the slots in the movie, we probably ended up writing 3 songs before we ended up with the one that's in the movie.
He would be the one who'd call us up and say, "Take another crack at it."
On that one, we actually wrote a song called Trip the Light Fantastic, and we just took that old expression, and because of light and the lamplighters. And then we kind of insanely wrote a song about how the lamplighters help the kids get home, explaining how the way they get around in the dark is to listen and hear. And it was a song all about the sounds of London. And it was a good song about the sounds of London. But then we realized, why did we write a song about sound? It should be about the light. And also, you know, light has such a meaning. So, and then this seems like the corniest. If you made a movie about songwriters, you'd go, that is really corny. But so we were like, okay, we're going to write another song. And I was on a city bike in New York City, where you can, you know, stick your thing in and you get a bike, and then you leave it wherever you're going. And I was going to meet Scott at Rob and John's apartment to talk about where we were at with the movie. And I'm on the bicycle. And meanwhile, Scott is the king of titles. So almost every title always comes from Scott. In this one case, though, there I am on the bike, and the spokes are going tick, 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 tick. And I'm going, what should that song title be? And instead of Trip the Light Fantastic, trip a little, trip a little, trip a little. And it was like that Betty Davis movie with the wheels, Chicago, Chicago. You know, it's like trip a little light, trip a little light, triple. So by the time I got to the apartment, I was like, Scott, come on, let's go. We have a new title. And then we just wrote that other song. And, you know, and our demo is like 3.5 minutes long. And then there was a 16-bar dance break. And then Rob and John and David Crane, our dance arranger, blow it up into what you see.
And to
on
speak
screen.
for Rob, because he can't be here to answer that.
And the strange thing is that Rob is just down the street. He just didn't want to come. It's so odd. I don't understand.
He's in Europe. He's teasing. But he's as exquisite a director he is as a choreographer, and he, I think, always wanted to do that big production number with real athletic dancing and good storytelling. That's what good choreography is. So in that number, you see all the accoutrements that have been earned in the story, the ladders and the bicycles, and so it feels, again, like a good song, organic. Even the choreography does. It's an 8-minute number. You know, when you do a musical film, if you do it right, you have a lot of rehearsal time. So we had 8-9 weeks of rehearsal. And that number was rehearsed all the way through, as you might imagine. And some of those takes ran almost from beginning to end on that magnificent set that John Mayer so beautifully designed in that abandoned park. So it was, I think, a highlight for everyone to get to make a movie that had that kind of delightful number that we all remember. But also it's Rob's work really at his best.
You and Rob and Emily worked in Into the Woods. Was Emily always your first choice?
Emily was the only choice. You know, as Rob called me, he said, I don't think we do the movie without Emily, because, for many reasons, but she's instantly authentic, just Emily Blunt, because she's such an exquisite actress. She sings beautifully. When you see her act, and she and I made a number of films together, and I never see Emily in the movie. I always see whatever that character is she's portraying. She sings, she dances like nobody's business, and she's British. I mean, it's and she is very, her work is very nuanced. In this film in particular, what she's doing is really sophisticated. If you watch that movie again, every look of hers is intentioned, and it's because she's masterminding what's going on. Did you see that she took the briefcase away from Michael the morning of? Everything or she is feeling the feelings of those kids, or in that wonderful moment where she says, off we go, she's letting us in on how the humanity that's under that sternness and that sort of eccentric woman. But she's also, and this is what Emily found in her, Emily did this, she has such empathy for people because she comes and makes lives better. There's nothing in it for her because she has to leave. And she carries that sadness about not being able to attach. Emily does, right under the surface. So you really feel it toward the end of the film, I think. And so I honestly think we would not have made the movie. We were so cautious, as Marc said, at every step, because we loved the first so much, that if Emily had said no, I don't know that we would have continued. And she said yes on the phone to Rob.
You mentioned that sadness that she must have, Mary Poppins, that Emily brings. And when getting to score the movie, I've seen every frame of it a billion times, but that shot when she looks into the balloon, this balloon that one sees oneself, and at first it's funny that she says, you know, practically perfect and everyone, and then the look that comes over her face of all these, I guess is what she's thinking, all these children. It reminds me of the end of Goodbye, Mr. Chips, when someone says, you know, are you ever sad that you didn't have any children? And he says, I had hundreds of them, all boys. And that look into the balloon just breaks my heart every time. She's so good.
And yeah. Mame, Sweeney Todd, you get to work, Scott, with one of the greatest musical theater actresses in the world, Angela Lansbury. What was it like to write?
It's great, except I wasn't there. We were working in New York, and so when she did finally record the songs, I was only on Skype. But I can't deny that the thrill of Dick Van Dyke and Angela Lansbury singing our songs is, probably the greatest joy I've had in the theater, and in movies. But it's quite an experience when it happens. I sometimes forget I had anything to do with it when I'm watching it.
And Marc, London it's a big part of the film, and you actually shot on locations, right?
Well, yes, very much so. It was very, again, intended. It was very important to Rob, and one of the reasons he wanted to set it like the books in the Depression was, first of all, the relatability of a challenging time that people were going through, but also the grittiness of London. And then, so it was very important from Rob, and then from John Meyer, designer, and Dion Beebe, who so gorgeously shot the film, that you feel the darkness and the grit of London. So we shot a lot of that whole opening number is essentially a pass-through of London. You feel it instantly. And then that's, of course, contrasted with those wonderful episodes of fantasy, where the light is different, the design is different, and then the worlds collide. And in that ending, when all is restored, and Ben Whishaw says, I never knew I'd feel such joy in my life again, that's matched by the beauty of that fair, both the lighting and the design and the unbridled joy that liftoff in the air with that wonderful tune goes, and the magic of Angela Lansbury, who's 91 when she shot that, and just the magic that comes over her. And that's before you get to Dick Van Dyke, who when he came on the set, held Rob's hand like this and said, I feel the same spirit of the first film right here today, thank you. I mean, it was his gift to us, but he felt it was a gift to him. And then beautiful actor, and then he starts to dance. And then he gets up on the desk by himself and does that whole thing. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. In fact, when he finished that beautiful monologue, where he's talking about Michael as a little boy, and he mentions grandfather, which always gets me because I'm a grandfather now, and sort of the generational aspect of the film. But during that take, when it was over, nobody called cut. And they looked over at Rob, and he was crying. at the monitor. I think finally Emily called a cut because nobody else did.
You use hand-drawn techniques in this film. Can you tell us about?
Sure. Well, one of the bars we had, it started with Rob, was what would we want to see in a film? What would because we loved the first so much, and Rob from day one said, it has to conjure, provoke, in an organic way. Again, tell our story, but yesteryear, and so it had to be hand drawn animation. We brought some wonderful animators out of retirement to make that happen. Every frame, like the good old days, is hand-drawn. And there were many 20-something young animators who look at it as a forgotten art and were taught and participated in it. And then we were able to employ, which no one's ever done before, the techniques of today, which is, to get a little technical, sort of the 3D backgrounds and sort of CG elements that let the camera move in a way you couldn't back in the day. And then these guys wrote those magnificent songs, particularly the music hall song, "A Cover Is Not a Book." And then you have Lynn and Emily in the kind of, again, technically, that interaction with the animation, which the technology is so sophisticated. This is all Rob directing. We have that great song. We're in the middle of it. Of course, Lynn is giving a patter, a rap, if you will, in English music hall style. It has everything, and it tells the story, most importantly. And
I have to just say, one of the most exciting and fun times that I had on this was when we had just gotten a first draft of the script, and we went out to Disney and met with the animators and showed them and these guys were there ready to play music that would be part of the film. And the animators were sitting with just little pads of paper, and they'd go, "Do you think the character looks like that?" And yeah, sure, And what if they did this? And pretty soon Rob is collecting these pieces of paper and sticking them on a board. Yeah. And it was a collaboration, and I'm retyping the scene as we go, trying to get all these notes for
Marc
what's
was
happening.
At the piano.
He's hammering at the piano. It was amazing. It was the most collaborative scene I've ever been a part of, and we did that a couple of times.
They tried to put us in the movie I was a giraffe, and I think you were
A walrus.
We got cut. We got cut.
David, this film obviously is meant for children, but also for older children in all of us adults. Was that something that in the writing you were calibrating who your audience was?
I think the audience was us. Someone asked something about that the other day, and I was like, gosh, I don't think I was writing for the kids on one page and the adults on the next. I think we were trying to write something like the film that we remembered, only something new. And of course, we were aware that there are certain things you don't put in kids' films, and there are certain things that adults will respond to. But really, we were writing about people who are going through a difficult time, and for anyone of any age, there comes a point where it feels like there's no going forward. You're lost in the fog. And we had a lamplighter from the first scene promising us that we'd get to a happy ending and that we'd find that way through. And that was our guiding force on this. So I don't think we were ever writing just for one age.
No, because the kids don't forget. We wrote it for the grown-ups so they wouldn't forget, really. And it's also, about a single parent trying to raise his family and hold on to his home. And what's been so interesting is we've only screened the movie for a couple of weeks because it's not in release yet. And I have the unsolicited incoming I've had from fathers who are so appreciative of the honesty in which that performance, but also that character that you wrote, who's able to be vulnerable in front of his children and express and articulate his sadness. And, he's doing the best he can as a parent. And sometimes when you let kids in on that, it has the kind of bonding that is actually better than maybe hiding it from them. So there's a real honesty in it, I think.
Which, Marc Shaiman, working with Ben Whishaw, it's so surprising. I mean, we've always known what a great actor he is, but to actually hear him sing, and it's so touching. Tell us about working.
He
with
was in the Crucible on Broadway when we were starting to write, and so he came over. He was in consideration for the part. I don't think it was 100%, but he says, "I don't know if I think I can sing, and I don't know what what
He
could
had never
sing.
sung in a musical.
So he
and-
said, well, here we are talking about Mary Poppins. He says, I guess I know Feed the Birds. So I ran to the piano and played Feed the Birds, and Ben Whishaw with that face. And even on a close-up in a movie, on a screen, you can't even imagine what it's like in real life. His face is just so beautiful. And so there he was singing Feed the Birds. And it was so... And then we also knew, well, that was the voice to write for that song.
Then we wrote that song for him.
And in a way that sometimes, life will hopefully always inform what you're writing. A friend of ours had lost his wife just a few years back and had 3 children as well. And he would tell us about how he would still continue to talk to her at the end of the day. And it was always heartbreaking when he said that sometimes he found himself saying, Nan, where'd you go? So we stole it. So we called him. We said, can we have your blessing to make use of this most intimate part of your life? And he said yes. And so
We had the great luxury, too, of having Emily and Lynn. Well, Emily right from the beginning. And so she was making A Girl on the Train, and so she was playing this blackout drunk. And then she'd come to us and be Mary Poppins on Thursdays. And she was also expecting a child. So she would come, and we got to sort of hand tailor everything because we wrote a few songs for almost every slot. And so she would come over and we tried this out, and she was a very integral part of the collaboration we had, as was Lynn. And so, Lynn felt it was a great joy after Hamilton was a massive amount of work and labor for him, and the idea that he could move to Europe and with his family and cut his hair off and just work was almost a vacation. Literally, a movie is no vacation for anyone. But he would come over and we'd try things out on him. It was a great thing to write specifically to their strengths.
And he's such a gentleman and a mensch that he would never say, well, have you thought about this word or that rhyme? Or, he would never make us feel like, oh my God, this is kind of bizarre that we're writing songs for Lynn. And Marc Platt would call us every few months, because we wrote the first song, Lovely London Sky, this kind of gentle introduction into the movie. And then Marc would, call and say, are we sure we're delivering Lin-Manuel? We have to make sure we're delivering Lin-Manuel. And then we'd write another song. He says, well, how are you delivering Lin-Manuel? Until finally Scott and I felt like we were on an episode of Call the Midwife. Like, we got Lin, he's crowning now. Here he comes. And we wrote 5 songs eventually. And we wrote the 5th song was really up-tempo and a joyous welcome into the movie. And Emily Blunt was walking down the hall at rehearsal. We were there in England. And she said, oh, what's that? And so we sang her this song about when you're going down the corner, you're going to see things. And it was fun. And she was like, Then she ran out the room and she ran down to Rob Marshall and said, you used that first song that I heard about Lovely London Sky. Trust that. And also, it was wonderful because Lynn wanted to show other sides of himself and not just do what people might expect at first. Luckily, we get to do that eventually in the movie. So, what was the question?
It was about Ben Whishaw.
Ben Whishaw.
Yeah, but no, you cover quite a lot, and
Sorry.
and
They keep us cooped up. They let us out every now and then.
that said, guys, thank you for being here. What a joy! Congratulations!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.